West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Rudy Giuliani, which, as you know, is a name that evokes so much in politics, in law, and also in charting the insurrection and the coup. There might be no person other than Donald Trump more closely associated with those efforts to overturn the election. No person more tightly aligned with the strategy, the big lie, the attempts at every level, state, local, elector, and then ultimately marching and storming the Capitol. Might be no person larger than Giuliani. So the headline here is a big deal. Special Counsel Jack Smith getting Giuliani. That's a sign, again, that this probe, which at times had stalled out with regard to aspects of January 6th, is intensifying under Special Counsel Smith's leadership. You see Giuliani there with Trump. He met with Smith's team, we can now report, under an agreement that's called a proffer, and we'll get into exactly what that involves, but it basically is a type of step or victory for Jack Smith, because it means that he has gotten Giuliani to sit down and talk. It can also ultimately lead to a cooperation deal, although that's not being reported yet. But there may be a great interest inside DOJ in getting everything they can out of Giuliani, or getting him to flip and provide material, factual evidence and otherwise, on who else, including Donald Trump, may have been involved in crimes related to the coup. Now, Giuliani's played many roles. He was, of course, a prosecutor himself. He was mayor. But his role here is the personal lawyer in the face of the big lie. The New York Times is one of the outlets that's reported this, and they describe it as a, quote, voluntary interview. This is new, breaking today. The interview itself, they document as taking place sometime last week, and an indication that Smith is seeking witnesses who might cooperate in the case. Again, that word cooperate, because proffer can lead to more than just words. It can lead to a full-blown cooperation deal. Now, the New York Times reports that the feds asked about very specific things, including a plan to create, quote, fake slates of pro-Trump electors. But they also asked about something that we've documented in our special reports here, the role played by coup mastermind John Eastman and lawyer Sidney Powell. And they asked about one of the arrows I've shown you when we break down the plots, one of the aborted plans to try to get the military to commit a coup for Donald Trump. Now, that plan didn't go forward, but it was discussed at the Willard Hotel days before the Capitol, along with other things that Steve Bannon, Powell, and sort of the more extreme folks were cooking up. And by the way, Giuliani was on record, according to the Jan 6 committee, warning against the military coup. So that's a bundle of things that the Times and others say was discussed. They've also asked about the election night, and what Giuliani was telling Trump that early on. There's a lot more, of course, in a full accounting that Giuliani would have to explain, including stuff like this.
Let me answer the question. Let me answer the question. I know crimes. I can smell them. You don't have to smell this one. That could have been Mickey Mouse. That could have been a dead person.
Ballots that were stuck in the machine 8 times, 9 times, 10 times.
All the networks. Wow. All the networks. Did you all watch My Cousin Vinny?
We're joined by someone who knows his way around exactly these kind of investigations, Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman, who we call on big nights like this. As this news was breaking, the Times says it was as recent as last week. NBC has also confirmed it. We're learning about it today. Nick, what does it mean to you that Jack Smith got Giuliani to sit down?
This is absolutely huge, Ari. This means that they have evidence, that they have somehow convinced Bob Costello, who's Rudy's lawyer, to bring him in for a proffer agreement. And I think what we have to look at here, one plausible explanation is that Mark Meadows had testified in the grand jury recently. And Mark Meadows was really kind of the ringmaster for Donald Trump, dealing with all the people across the spectrum, from Rudy to Roger Stone to General Flynn to Steve Bannon. And I have to believe that they came up with enough evidence on Rudy that he is concerned enough that he went in and realized that he has to play let's make a deal. And the way this works...
Let's reflect right there on the point. Let's reflect on what you're breaking down, Nick, because we hear about people going in, and obviously you can go in and be less than cooperative, or you can be put before the grand jury. We've heard about that. People have heard as we've monitored all this. You're emphasizing the distinction that because it's a proffer, because it was a voluntary sit-down, that means you perceive Smith and his team as having pressured and moved Giuliani, moved him towards the DOJ?
Absolutely. He didn't go in there willy-nilly just happy to volunteer because he's suddenly a good citizen. I think they really came up with more evidence, basically presented that to his lawyer, Robert Costello. I know Robert Costello. We were in the U.S. Attorney's Office together. He's a good lawyer, and he would know when it would be appropriate to bring Rudy Giuliani in for a proffer agreement. Now, to break it down a little bit further, just to explain what a proffer agreement is, it's also known as a queen for a day agreement. What it means is that what you say will not be used against you unless you wind up lying. Then all bets are off, and then you can be indicted or charged with perjury. But it also has as part of it that any statements that you make that lead to other evidence can thereafter be used by the prosecution. So in a sense, Rudy Giuliani really has to bare his soul and has to be truthful because he has some idea of what Mark Meadows has said. He has some idea of what other people have said. He was right smack dab in the middle of the big lie and the perpetration of that lie in 30, 40 different courts around the country where he basically got tossed out every single time.
So let's dive into that. Let's dive into that in plain English, Nick, because that could scare other people that he is talking about, whether it's a Eastman or a Sidney Powell. It could scare Donald Trump himself. Let's take one of the, what I told viewers is one of the arrows, one of the plots they didn't finish, but that may have involved crimes, which was that there were people reportedly trying to commit a military coup. You know, we just followed a Russian version of that. They were trying to do that here. And no one has yet been indicted for that, Nick, but as you know, that's a serious thing. Giuliani reportedly through his people tried to tell the January 6th committee that he warned against that. He never cooperated fully, but there was reporting that he warned against that. You're saying that Jack Smith could sit him down now and say, as long as you tell the truth, you can give us more detail about how that was going to work. How far did it go? Did anyone call the Pentagon? Sidney Powell was allegedly appointed to that role. Did that intersect with any of these would-be, wannabe, self-proclaimed militia-style military veteran tough guys, some of whom have now been convicted on Jan 6? You're saying to us tonight that this means Giuliani can actually say that stuff with some protection for himself, and Jack Smith can then use it?
Yes, he can absolutely use it. And the question will be what the end game is for Rudy Giuliani. Is he going to have to plead guilty to some kind of lesser crime, or are they going to give him immunity? I kind of think they're going to insist on a lesser crime. The military coup that you're talking about was in December of 2020 when they were talking about actually putting the military out there and seizing the voting machines. What Giuliani may know something about is what stopped that, which was, I believe, there was talk about them getting this information through a different source. And obviously, as it turns out, we learned that one of those different sources was from Coffee County in Georgia, where they actually took out data and used that, and they took data out of another county in Michigan.
And I'm only jumping in. I want you to finish your point, but the arrows I mentioned is that military plot is on our screen here. Viewers can see that would be illegal no matter what. That's why it's red. We'll put this in full, Nick. When you look closely at this, what you'll also see is when that military plot failed. So you see military seized voting machines. It stopped, as you mentioned accurately, in December. It was that very night when they pulled back on that, when allegedly Trump was warned, you will be in prison for this alone if you keep going. That night, he sent out the first public call for Jan 6. That's why the January 6 sabotage arrow begins when the military ends. And so do you think Smith could also, through this Giuliani proffer, say what else was going on that night? You're already talking about using force in a way. That would be government force. Now you're talking about Jan 6. Who was going to be called up? Why was it that same night? Why did you say it'll be wild? Why was Navarro's name in the tweet? How would that all work, Nick?
Oh, sure. I mean, he'd be asked about all of those. In fact, you recall when Cassidy Hutchinson testified before the January 6th committee, she and Giuliani had walked out one evening before that, where Rudy said to her, boy, it's going to be wild, Cassidy. Are you excited about what's going to happen on January 6th? I mean, he was smack dab in the middle of everything. If he comes totally clean here, Donald Trump's in big trouble. John Eastman's in big trouble. Right down the line, possibly General Flynn, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon. I mean, particularly, I don't think they've had anybody who has been in place in that Willard Hotel war room. And what was going on there, and what was the connection between people in that war room and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers?
It is Thursday, the 29th of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, just a little. Well, the former guy, is that what we call him? I don't know. Former guy? That guy? The orange monster? Well, he's going off, isn't he? Shoo-wee! I do like how Ari put it there at the top, because this is Trump's prison nightmare. And what is that? Well, Giuliani speaking to the DOJ. Yeah, proffer an agreement and see what happens. Okay, well, will it move any MAGA to, I don't know, see the light of day? Of course not. But the law doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. Just because a bunch of delusional, I don't know, poorly educated deplorables can't face reality, we have to bend to their whim? BS. Tired of it. I'm tired of these people like DeSantis ramming their fascism down our throats and saying, oh, that they're the victims. Bullshit. It's all bullshit. This guy's playing the same Reconstruction or, the anti-Reconstruction BS from the day. It's an obvious playbook. I wish people would wake up to it. Of course, I'm not speaking to the choir. I don't mean we or you or any of us. We know that. But how is it that top Dem leadership have not heard of the Moms of Liberty? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it took them forever to figure out who the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were. Constitutional sheriffs? What's that? Okay. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance will drive you off a cliff. The whole point of not being a poorly educated deplorable is so that we see reality for what it is. Moms for Liberty is a hate group. They are an extremist hate group. Dare I call them Nazis? Now, I have been calling the Moms for Liberty Nazi Fraus, but it really is Nazi Frauen. Okay. There's no such thing as Nazi Fraus in Germany, but there are plural Frauen. I was reminded of my old high school German lessons. How quickly we forget. Okay. They are Nazi Frauen. And they are ramming their ideology down our throats, and we will not put up with it anymore. Why is it that empathy is considered a bad thing? Woke. Damn right we're woke. And you would expect that the progeny of slave owners would take a black idiom and turn it around as a pejorative. Same old, same old. And you don't need to be bumping the age we are to know that. On the other hand, it does astound me when I come across YouTubes where people have heard Frank Zappa for the first time, and I'm like, am I that old? And I realize, yes, I am, and so are we. Oh, the old people's lament. Never knew that it would happen to us. Well, some of us knew. And the rest of us just wanted to pretend it wasn't going to happen. Okay, talk about facing reality, huh? Jeez. Well, I knew I was getting old when I was still in high school, and I realized the body will break. I thought we were supposed to be able to bounce. Apparently not. Forever. Yeah, you can bounce. But there might be some damage inflicted. Okay. You know, we have a curated show for you today that we might want to just dive into here rather than just go off like we sometimes do. Sometimes. Anyway, we have curated a show, and there's some actually important issues to be addressed, and why don't we get into that right now as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Connecticut's first Muslim state representative was assaulted during an Eid al-Adha ceremony in Hartford. What the hell? Threw her to the ground. Assaulted kids. Okay. It's not our side that foments this kind of attitude, let me just say. All right. My Oregon governor, Tina Kotek, named a new Secretary of State after the last one resigned over her consultancy work for the pot industry while she was Secretary of State. I think, maybe you don't want to do that. And Wisconsin Republicans are trying to force a vote on firing the state's nonpartisan top elections official before the 2024 presidential election. Yeah, well, I know people hate all the Nazi references, but before the Nazis became the Nazis, they did exactly this kind of shit. Excuse my French in the morning. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a UN human rights official says an arms embargo and deployment of special forces is needed for Haiti immediately. And Scientists have finally heard the chorus of gravitational waves that ripple through the universe. Maybe. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and down a skosh there near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us put a big dent in the bills and other costs incurred running this powerhouse of resistance. You know, over the many years, we have found that if you pay your bills, you kind of fly under the radar because they're still using that old technology. And we're able to fly under it and continue this powerhouse of resistance as the founders originally intended so many years ago. So thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam, of course. Now, I post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before each showtime, but you can always find those show notes and links diaries because I have the links on my social media feeds, so there. You can follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, by going to @CookbookWest. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker. Not Stitcher anymore, apparently. Okay, so Spreaker, not Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, I don't know, wherever you can find podcasts. Deezer is still there. Stitcher is out. Deezer's still Deezering. All right. Okay. I need to mention, as we were getting out of the break, the little musical interlude there, I accidentally looked up out of the bubble that I impose upon myself because there's only so much more information you can take in and then you have to do the show. Well, in the prep for the show, I didn't realize that SCOTUS had handed down a decision or two. And apparently, we don't have affirmative action anymore. And the reason we don't have affirmative action anymore is if you're going to reconstruct the Old South, you can't have affirmative action. All right. The rest of the world is moving forward, and these guys want to drag us back to some sort of antebellum BS. Apparently, Robert said it would be racist to consider race in admissions. Now, of course, this doesn't have anything to do with legacies. There's no imposition upon legacies. My question would be, but yeah, aren't the legacies by and large, white? And Roberts would say, yeah, but that's just an incidental thing. It has nothing to do with race. And he's like sitting around drinking sherry with his friends saying, those other people, those people. We have to let those people go to our schools. God, these people piss me off. All right, let's get into this first offering because this pisses me off too. And it is, I was going to go to I think it was the Hartford Journal, but Matthew Chapman at Raw Story, I think, gives a much better reportage than what was over there at the Hartford Journal. So Connecticut's first Muslim state representative was assaulted during an Eid al-Adha ceremony at Hartford, and the suspect, now in custody, faces a laundry list of charges. According to several reports, State Representative Mariam Khan, Democrat from Windsor, was physically and verbally attacked in an incident that, as the Connecticut chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations calling for a hate crime investigation. And that was reported by Michael Lemansky. Reportedly, the suspect approached Khan's group, made vulgar and obscene remarks, and then grabbed and struck Khan before throwing her to the ground. Andre Desmond, 30 of New Britain, was charged with unlawful restraint, assault, breach of peace, and interfering with police, the report said. The attack also targeted Khan's sister, a female friend, and Khan's 3 children, all under the age of 15. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont spoke out about the incident. "My heart is with Representative Mariam Khan," he said on Twitter, who was attacked after attending Eid al-Adha's services with her family. "It's disturbing to me that this happened on a holy day meant to be marked with peaceful prayer. I'm keeping her and her loved ones in my thoughts. Anti-Muslim discrimination, which has always existed in the United States but kicked into high gear after the September 11th terrorist attacks over 2 decades ago, has been behind some high-profile incidents in recent years. Earlier this year, for instance, DePage Township, Illinois trustee Reem Townsend was subject to abuse from local residents after they realized she was fasting for Ramadan, with one even calling her a suicide bomber during a town meeting. Claire Rush of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Levon Griffin Valade has been appointed Oregon's new Secretary of State, Democratic Governor Tina Kotek announced in a news release yesterday, Wednesday, filling the vacancy created when Shamia Fagan resigned last month over criticism for her consultancy work for a marijuana business while she was Secretary of State. Griffin Valade worked as a government performance auditor for more than 16 years, according to Kotek's news release. I know Levon Griffin Valade first and foremost from her experience holding government leaders accountable, her ethical judgment, and her reputation as a leader with a steady hand who rises above politics, Kotek said, speaking to reporters from the Oregon State Library in the state capital, Salem, yesterday, Wednesday. Accountability and transparency are precisely what this role demands at this moment after the scandal in that office. Kotek added she thinks there should be extra scrutiny on the Secretary of State in order to reestablish public confidence in the office, which oversees elections and audits state entities. Fagan quit her post in early May after coming under fire for her side work as a paid consultant for an affiliate of marijuana retailer La Moda. Her consultancy job, first reported by the Willamette Week, paid $10,000 a month, with bonuses 3 times that amount if she helped the company get licensed in other states. The Secretary of State's annual salary is $77,000, established almost a decade ago. Fagan started working for the marijuana business in February while her office was wrapping up an audit of the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. The audit, released in late April, called for Oregon's marijuana regulatory agency to reform some rules for marijuana businesses, describing them as burdens when combined with federal restrictions. Well, I would say one of the big ones is not being able to have a bank account and everything has to be done in cash. While Fagan had recused herself from the audit, she came under pressure from officials across the political spectrum following the revelations. Her resignation was welcomed by Speaker of the House Dan Rayfield, Senate President Rob Wagner, House Majority Leader Julie Fahey, and Senate Majority Leader Kate Lieber, all of them fellow Democrats. Final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republicans who control the Wisconsin Senate, in a surprise move last night, Wednesday, proceeded with trying to force a vote on firing the state's nonpartisan top elections official before the 2024 presidential election. The Senate voted to move ahead at a later date with a public hearing and ultimately a confirmation vote on the reappointment of Megan Wolfe for a second term overseeing elections in the presidential battleground state. Democrats walked out of the Senate chamber before the vote, objecting to bringing the unscheduled resolution to a vote at 9:30 at night on a day that was expected to focus on passage of the state budget. The Republican move was an attempt to get around Democrats on the Wisconsin Elections Commission, who a day earlier tried to block the Senate from ever getting a chance to vote on Wolfe's confirmation. Democrats fear that the Senate will reject her confirmation, which is the same as firing her. The 3 Democrats on the Elections Commission abstained from a vote on Tuesday on reappointing Wolfe. The 3 Republican members voted in favor. The Senate ignored that deadlock vote and said in the resolution that passed Wednesday night that it considered the 3-0 vote, with 3 abstaining, to be a sign of unanimous support for Wolfe. State law requires there be 4 votes for Wolfe to be reappointed. Republicans are simply ignoring the law in an attempt to get what they want, said Democratic Elections Commission member Ann Jacobs. Apparently, Megan Wolfe is living in the heads of the Senate delegation rent-free, and they live in mortal fear that she will continue to run free and fair elections in Wisconsin, Jacobs said. Another Democratic Elections Commissioner, Mark Thompson, said that he puts his faith in the courts and not this current Senate leadership in sorting it out. Republican Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, or Mayu, said that it was the Senate that was following the law by proceeding with the reappointment question since Wolfe's term ends on Friday. He accused Democrats on the Elections Commission of diminishing faith in our elections with their antics. See how they like to turn it around. The question of Wolf's reappointment will now be the subject of a public hearing, a vote by a Senate committee, and then ultimately a vote by the full Senate. Lemieux said Republicans have a 22-11 majority in the Senate. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Melissa Agard told reporters that Democrats walked out, that they were disgusted and frustrated with a surprise move by Republicans. Senate Republican leaders have said there isn't enough support to confirm Wolf for a second term overseeing elections in the presidential battleground state. Some Republicans have called for her to resign over how she ran the 2020 presidential election that President Joe Biden narrowly won. Wisconsin is so narrowly divided. 4 of the past 6 presidential elections have been decided by less than a percentage point. Wolf has staunchly defended the decisions she made and fought back against false claims of election fraud, including those made by Donald Trump. Biden's win has withstood 2 partial recounts, a nonpartisan audit, a conservative law firm's review, numerous state and federal lawsuits, and a Republican-ordered review that found no evidence of fraud before the investigator was fired. The GOP-controlled legislature has rejected attempts to decertify the results. Well, they never quit, do they? Rust never sleeps, and it corrodes. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
An unlikely team of researchers and, get this, tiger sharks has discovered the world's largest seagrass ecosystem. It's been hiding in plain sight just off the coast of the Bahamas. The results appear in Nature Communications. This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Joseph Polidoro. As ecosystems go, seagrasses are right up there with rainforests and coral reefs.
But it's actually one of the most important hubs or magnets for biodiversity.
Austin Gallagher is a marine biologist and CEO of Beneath the Waves, an ocean conservation nonprofit. Seagrasses are nurseries to 1/5 of the world's largest fisheries and are shelters for thousands of species. They protect other habitats and coastlines, and they store enormous amounts of carbon that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere.
It's sort of this, incredible unsung hero of ocean conservation.
But as much as half the world's seagrass is yet to be found. We're protecting these critical ecosystems with surveys that are as accurate as an early Renaissance map of the New World. That's because unlike mangroves and warm water coral reefs, seagrass meadows aren't always picked up by satellite or airplane observation. Cloud cover and glare from the seafloor also keep the Bahamas seagrass hidden.
So there's a lot of false negatives and a lot of false positives.
Carlos Duarte is a marine ecologist at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia.
If I had tried to do it myself, probably I wouldn't have never tried.
For decades, Carlos had suspected that the Bahama banks might host an enormous seagrass habitat, but he couldn't prove it.
Remote sensing will never produce a reliable record, and then ground truth in the Bahamas banks, because of the sheer size, proved impossible.
By the way, ground truthing is establishing the on-the-ground truth by direct observation. For seagrass, that's usually done by divers or by researchers on a boat.
I really believe that if we had not come together like we did, this discovery might not have happened.
Then by chance, Carlos met Austin and saw footage from Austin's shark-mounted cameras.
And we saw these vast underwater seagrass meadows.
Carlos had found his ground truthers.
Tiger sharks were the total game changer of this whole process. And tiger sharks love seagrass habitat. So tiger sharks are this incredible ally.
But how do you collaborate with a large carnivorous shark?
These tiger sharks have teeth that are capable of doing serious damage, and that's not, demonizing them. That's just a fact.
For the study, Gallagher's team caught 8 tiger sharks and outfitted them with satellite tags. The researchers also attached cameras to 7 more sharks. At first,
waves crashing, it's just hectic. Nature, everybody's shouting, we're reeling this animal in, trying to restrain it, put a tail rope around its tail, fasten it to the side of the boat.
Once the shark is secured,
well, it's actually kind of amazing. It just kind of chills out, and it actually is quite peaceful.
In 12 minutes on average for each shark, the team took measurements, collected blood samples, and installed the recording equipment. The sharks were then released to roam the bank's seagrass meadows. The tiger sharks were much better observers than humans.
About 70 kilometers per day, 24/7.
They're also 1/5 the cost of humans or drones. By combining the shark footage and location data with thousands of boat and diver surveys, the team could correctly interpret the satellite images,
ultimately revealing the world's largest seagrass meadow up to 93,000 square kilometers.
That's about the size of Portugal and nearly 40 times the size of original estimates. The find increases known seagrasses globally by 1/3. The world's remaining undiscovered seagrass meadows will be smaller, Carlos says. To map them, Carlos will use another charismatic denizen of seagrass ecosystems, sea turtles.
So we're doing that now in the Red Sea, and then actually getting a very reliable mapping not only of where seagrass meadows are, but the individual area that they cover.
Carlos and his colleagues will soon be exploring near the Maldives and other archipelagos and island nations in Southeast Asia. Mapping seagrasses not only helps us protect them, it may also benefit the people who live near them.
So when you look at the carbon assets that sit in the seagrass meadow and the avoided emissions that can be achieved through conservation, and then apportion them to 300,000 people.
He's referring to the population of the Bahamas, now over 350,000 people.
Basically, every Bahamian owns $1 billion on carbon credits.
The team's work also puts sharks in a new, more flattering light.
These tiger sharks led us to these seagrass meadows. We now know that this is going to be a huge benefit for people of the Bahamas moving forward. It really demonstrates that if you protect the sharks, then you could potentially protect the people.
No small accomplishment for 15 tiger sharks and their human colleagues. For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Joseph Polidoro. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts, and follow scientificamerican.com for updated and in-depth science news.
This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Christopher Intagliata. It's easy to get lost in the salt pans of Tunisia. There are these featureless plains in the desert where the ground is sometimes the blinding white color of salt.
So it's a very strange feeling, and some people really feel uncomfortable there because you basically don't see anything.
Markus Knaden is at the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology in Jena, Germany. And he does fieldwork in the salt pans with his colleague Marilia Freira.
So actually the car that we drove was often the landmark, so we could know how to return back to it because it's very easy to get lost.
While it's easy to get lost for them, that's not really the case for their study subjects, a type of desert ant that can walk for more than half a mile over these flat plains and still find its way home. And to be fair, the ants have a few tricks to be able to do that.
What we know from them is they use a sun compass to get an idea in which direction they walk, and they count their steps to get an idea of the distances they cover in the individual directions. And by that, they always compute their relative position to the nest.
But the scientists noticed the ants had another trick too. The farther their burrows were into that flat, featureless plain, away from plants and rocks and other landmarks, the more the ants tended to build these big mounds at the entrances of their nests. They're like volcano-looking humps in the salt pan, sometimes more than 10 inches tall. And to get some sense of scale there, for these tiny ants, that's the equivalent of a human standing in front of a mountain the size of London's Big Ben. It's pretty big. And the researchers wanted to see if the ants really used these things for navigation, or if they were used for something else. So they destroyed a number of the mounds and put tall cylinders at some of the nest entrances instead. And at others, they put no landmark at all.
And what we realized was that ants with no artificial landmarks displayed a bigger effort into rebuilding their nest mound surrounding their nest entrance than those that had the artificial visual landmarks.
In other words, the ants presumably needed some sort of landmark at the colony to ensure everyone would find it. And if it wasn't there, they'd build it. The details are in the journal Current Biology. The scientists say the ants must be working together to do this, because the ones going out to forage need to collectively agree with the ones who stay put in the nest that the colony needs these landmarks, so the explorers need to convince the homebodies to build one. Konadin says it's remarkable the ants can do all that with such tiny brains.
That always fascinates me, and that makes me always thinking, why aren't we much, much better with our big brain? But I'm so bad in navigation compared to those ants. I'm a bit jealous.
Then again, we don't really have to do what the ants do, because our big brains invented GPS. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Del Vicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Music by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to scientificamerican.com for in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The Senate has confirmed the first Muslim female federal judge in U.S. history.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The first Muslim female federal judge and the first Bangladeshi American judge is Nusrat Chaudhry. Since 2020, Ms. Chaudhry has served as the legal director of the ACLU of Illinois. From 2008 until 2020, she served at the National ACLU office, 7 years as the deputy director of the ACLU's Racial Justice Program. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer described Chaudhry as a shining example of the American dream. She is the daughter of immigrant parents, a graduate of Columbia and Princeton, and Yale Law School. After law school, she clerked for a U.S. District Court judge, and then at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. She's also served on the Presidential Task Force on Building Trust in the American justice system. Chaudhry has led litigation to protect immigrants from dangerous detention conditions. Her team advances gender equity and the rights of children in foster care and young people in juvenile detention, as well as First Amendment rights and governmental transparency. She is expert in voting rights. The confirmation vote? It was basically along party lines. 49 opposed, 50 in favor. Judge Chaudhry will sit in the Federal District Court in Brooklyn. Congratulations, Judge.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the Industrial Workers of the World between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid to upper 90s. We are under an active heat advisory for the region, so people should take care for considering that. Sunny conditions, of course, throughout the day. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight, lows in the low 60s, not nearly cool enough by my standards. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then sunny skies tomorrow and hot, with highs in the upper 90s to the low 100s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains high here in the town of Rogue River. The air quality index, though, for the region is in the good range at 19 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, so you do know to take care. Barometric pressure is just now falling at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's the Weather Underground. London is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 75 and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory, heavy thunderstorm advisory. And I've been in Paris when they've had thunderstorms, and that is scary. Rome is 87 and partly cloudy, also with a thunderstorm advisory, and it's just as scary there too. Kyiv is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 75 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 degrees and fair, except not to the people who want democracy. Tokyo is 80 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 42 and clear because it's winter time for them. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay for heavy wind. Take care if you're out there sailing or motoring. And New York, New York is 76 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, and mostly those clouds are full of Canadian wildfire smoke. So take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Evan Sanone and Danica Cotto of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A UN human rights expert said that a specialized international force is needed to help fight gang violence in Haiti and that a weapons embargo should be implemented immediately. William O'Neill, who was appointed expert on human rights in Haiti in April, spoke at the end of a 10-day trip during which he met with civil society leaders, government officials, and victims of gang violence. I found a country bruised by violence, misery, fear, and suffering, he said, adding that all types of human rights are being violated. It is urgent to take action. The survival of an entire nation is at stake. O'Neill said the absence of government is palpable and that the lack of response by officials is affecting people's access to water, food, health, education, and housing. He added that while Haitian authorities face immense challenges, the government has a duty to respond within its limited capabilities. O'Neill's visit comes as an understaffed and under-resourced police department struggles to fight against warring gangs who have grown more powerful since the July 2021 assassination of President Moise, with gangs now estimated to control up to 80% of the capital. The violence has led to an increase in starvation, with people unable to leave their homes and trucks unable to transport goods to Port-au-Prince and beyond.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Maddie Burakoff of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Scientists have observed for the first time the faint ripples caused by the motion of black holes that are gently stretching and squeezing everything in the universe. They reported yesterday, Wednesday, that they were able to hear what are now called low-frequency gravitational waves, changes in the fabric of the universe that are created by huge objects moving around and colliding in space. It really is the first time that we have evidence of this large-scale motion of everything in the universe, said Maura McLaughlin, co-director of Nanograv, the research collaboration that published the results in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. Einstein predicted that when really heavy objects move through space-time, the fabric of our universe, they create ripples that spread through that fabric. Scientists sometimes liken these ripples to the background music of the universe. In 2015, scientists used an experiment called LIGO to detect gravitational waves for the first time and showed Einstein was right. But so far, those methods have only been able to catch waves at high frequencies, explained Nanograv member Chiara Mengarelli, an astrophysicist at Yale University. Those quick chirps come from specific moments when relatively small black holes and dead stars crash into each other, she said. In the latest research, scientists were searching for waves at much lower frequencies. These slow ripples can take years or even decades to cycle up and down and probably come from the biggest objects in our universe, supermassive black holes billions of times the mass of our sun. Galaxies across the universe are constantly colliding and merging together. As this happens, scientists believe the enormous black holes at the centers of these galaxies also come together and get locked into a dance before they finally collapse into each other, explained Zabalux Marca, an astrophysicist at Columbia University who was not involved with the research. The black holes send off gravitational waves as they circle around these pairings known as binaries. No instruments on Earth could capture the ripples of these giants, so we had to build a detector that was roughly the size of the galaxy, said Nanograv researcher Michael Lamb of the SETI Institute. The results released this week include 15 years of data from Nanograv, which has been using telescopes across North America to search for the waves. Other teams of gravitational wave hunters around the world also published studies, including in Europe, India, China, and Australia. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.